Maybe start off by telling us who you are and how you first connected with Equip.
My name is Kyle, and I work as the Director of Students and Families at Christ Presbyterian Church here in Nashville, Tennessee. I guess I first got to know Equip through a friend of mine a few years ago, and he said, well, there's this ministry, and he told me a little bit about it. He said, hey, they're doing this training for youth ministers, and I think you should try to go if you can. And I think it was like the next day or something. It was happening immediately. You were really kind enough to let me join for the training, and then we had a conversation afterward, and we've kind of been good friends ever since.
Tell me more about how Equip has partnered with your church, come alongside you in ministry.
One of the things that comes to mind is that our student ministry staff team we've been through two of the half-day trainings that Equip offers to people, specifically for people that work with teens and students like us. And those have been extremely helpful for our team. And part of that has been, getting knowledge and information, but also hearing stories, and getting lots of practical tools and resources that we've been able to use in our ministry particularly with our teens who experience romantic attraction to people of the same sex. I know that you've also been kind enough to kind of proofread and look at some of our teaching content so that the language is, theologically accurate on the one hand, but also like linguistically sensitive, like the language is sensitive to a broader range of the students in our context. And I know that has been tremendously helpful. Thinking about what's been most powerful, I mentioned it a minute ago, but I think it begins with the stories that we've heard. And, Equip has always done a great job of providing, statistics and helpful information and facts and things that, can be sort of jarring at first, and those have been helpful. But yeah, I really would say the stories have been really powerful, and it started with those stories that kind of put flesh on the stats and facts. I think Equip has helped our team sort of making the shift from like talking about a topic or an issue, and instead, loving and serving real people who have unique stories and struggles. And I think that has been a game changer for our team at making that shift. And I really would credit Equip in large part for helping us to make that shift.
I know you've tagged along with Equip to a conference about these topics.
It is incredibly encouraging and really hopeful. I think the vision that the conference has brought, the vision of being surrounded by hundreds of people, men and women, who love Jesus and love God and have like this heart to follow Christ and to follow, God's word with, their whole person, and are doing that in a way, that is pushing against what, so many on all sides of them, seem to be saying, and so getting to just see this precious group of people gather and worship and pray and laugh and talk and be built up in their faith, So I think that has offered great hope to both our students who experience romantic attraction to people of the same sex, but also for our other students who, I think, are being stretched into how to think about these things well, and what do they believe about that, and the vision of, these Christian brothers and sisters that, are seeking to live in community and, to follow a traditional sexual ethic. It's hopeful and encouraging, and I've so enjoyed to get to bring that to our student ministry.
What was maybe the first moment where the importance of this work in the church clicked for you, when the kind of the light bulb went off?
I remember having a conversation about 4 or 5 years ago with one of my senior guys who I would have described at the time as a spiritually mature young man. We were talking about the church and sexuality and, just sort of that conversation. We ventured into that one evening. And I remember him saying that he wasn't quite sure why God wouldn't, be okay with two gay people marrying each other.
Yeah.
But I remember him also saying, like, this is what most of my friends are doing too, even my Christian friends.
Yeah.
And it was really that part that kind of shook me, and I'm sure I didn't show it in the moment, but I remember kind of coming away from that conversation going, wait a minute, what? There are like, that the idea that there were lots of young people that wouldn't understand that made perfect sense to me. But the idea that there were lots of Christian young people who didn't know what they believed about, marriage and sexuality and what the Bible has to say about those things, I was like, oh, wow. And that was sort of that like click moment where it clicked for me that, okay, the church, I think it's safe to say the church needs to change the way we approach this, rather than just assuming we can just teach this and they'll believe it and we're good to go. Really needing like a wholesale change to the way that we're approaching this conversation. Yeah. The many conversations that I'm now having with teens who, have peers and in some cases close friends who are gay. Yeah. And I am now able to help these students not only think about the friendship with this person in a way that is biblical and beautiful, but also to help them communicate in a way that is helpful and kind. And I think, again, Equipe has helped with that in so many ways to help give like a broader philosophy to the ways that we approach these things, but also the practical, helpful, like, things to say and things not to say. And so getting to offer that to our students has been really helpful. What I find with a lot of our students is that they want to have friendships and they want to, like, they have a desire to move into these spaces. They just don't know how. Yeah. And so I think it's been really sweet for our team to be able to speak to some of that, and stumble through it together. But I find myself having lots of conversations with young people about how we can interact with our gay friends and how to have real friendship with them. I think, that comes with asking good questions and, practicing term mirroring wherever possible, which is something Equipe has helped us to do and learn how to do, and really focusing on building relationship rather than, winning arguments.
I'd love to hear a story of, the ways maybe you've been able to use the training with Equipe.
One story that came to mind is just the opportunity to sit with two of our students, and the students shared with me for the first time their experience of romantic attraction to both guys and girls, and navigating that as, high schoolers. I'm not even sure that conversation would have happened a few years ago. And then when we began to change our teaching content, it really shifted into more of an invitation for our students to share these things with us, and saying over and over again, like, there's nothing that you can share with us that's going to surprise us or make us, love you any less. Reinforcing to them that you can share these things with us and it'll be okay. And I think just the fact that that conversation happened is as a result of a different environment we've created. And again, I would credit the training and the help that we've gotten from Equipe that really served as a catalyst and the reason that we were able to get to that conversation with those students.
Well, why don't we wrap up by sharing whatever advice you would have for pastors who want to better minister to gay people in the church?
Well, I would definitely encourage them to partner with Equipe for sure. Sure. I guess I kind of have three things that I think pastors, should think about doing. And the first one I think came directly from your mouth, Peter. I would encourage them to develop a plan. The farther along I've gone in this conversation, the more I realize this isn't the sort of thing we can just like go to a training or read a book or read an article and then check a box and move on. I think this is an ongoing process of learning and growing and getting equipped as we learn to minister to people who are both in our churches and outside our churches. So I would say develop a plan, and it short-term and long-term, and be committed to it with the knowledge that like this is an ongoing process and not something that's gonna just magically change, because we did one thing. I love the phrase graciously curious. I heard many years ago, and I just encourage pastors to be graciously curious during their own learning process. I think a lot of times we short circuit our learning because we feel threatened, or we get defensive, or we think we know the answers already. I'm very guilty of this on a regular basis. So I certainly am no exception, but yeah, I think staying curious and being gracious in the way that we are hearing and learning can be really helpful. It doesn't mean we have to agree with everything that we hear, but I think that we and the people we lead are much better served if we stay curious and really seek to learn. And then the last thing I would encourage is pastors to develop friendships with gay people. And this is probably the most important thing. It's certainly been the most important thing for me, I think. I think it changes the way that we minister when we have a friendship, and I would say a close friendship with someone who experiences the struggle that we're teaching and talking about. So I think that's true across the board for us as really just people in general, but especially as ministers, if we are in a position to teach and shepherd other people, I think having a relationship with someone who themselves experiences that struggle. Sometimes I wish it was mandatory for ministers to have a gay friend before teaching the subject. I don't know if that's possible or if it would be helpful, but it hasn't changed what I believe the Bible teaches.
Right.
If someone's afraid of, it's gonna, if I get too close to a gay person, then I'll, whatever, fill in the blank. So I can stand as an example of someone who's hasn't changed my thoughts on, a traditional biblical sexual ethic, but it has changed the way that I speak about these things. And I would say even more than that, it's changed my life. My brothers and sisters in Christ who experience these attractions have ministered to me and my family. I have been built up in my faith in ways that are sometimes difficult for me to describe. I think just being inside of and a part of a community of people who are, they're incredibly courageous and vulnerable. They're also very affectionate and loving, toward me in friendship. And just seeing their desire and commitment to follow Christ with their whole person, their whole mind, body, and soul is it's inspiring, it's encouraging, it's humbling, and it has just meant so much to me personally. And I think that when we're changed in that sort of way through relationship, we minister to others differently.
Thank you for being willing to share today.
Yeah.